Today's talk is titled, Coming Out Isn't Just for the LGBTQ plus community, to be delivered by Jamie Woolf. Jamie is a retired journalist who spent 32 years writing for the Salt Lake Tribune in Salt Lake City, Utah. Most of that time, she covered environmental issues. She received a Knight International Press Fellowship in 1998 and spent 6 months teaching journalism in Ecuador. She also was a visiting lecturer at Princeton University in 2001. Since moving to SLO some 16 years ago, she has been president of the Unitarian Universalist SLO Board of Trustees, a member of the SLO Police Advisory Committee, chair of the SLO City's Bicycle Advisory Committee, a state park docent at the Pismo Beach Monarch Grove, and a volunteer teacher of English as a second language. Last year, she was elected to the board of Planned Parenthood, California Central Coast. She is a proud transgender woman who served as chair of Trans Central Coast from 2018 to 2022. Trans Central Coast is a group that supports transgender and other gender diverse people in San Luis Obispo County. She is married to Sharon Emerson and, as you'll hear later, has a son and grandson who live in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Jamie. Okay, let's get rid of this. Hand that off to Andy. There we go. Okay, come on up with your computer. Go ahead. Let's see if I can help you with anything there.
That's perfect.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm going to start this morning with one of the most terrifying things I've faced in my life, something that took all of my courage to confront. That was telling my son, Peter, that I'm transgender. He lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan, with his wife and a really cute 13-year-old son, my only grandchild. For years, I wanted to tell him I was trans during his regular visits to SLO or mine to Michigan. I'd tell him about all the LGBTQ plus people I know and watch carefully for his response. He always seemed fine, sort of neutral, but I just never had the courage to take the next step and tell him the truth about me. I was afraid of losing my son and the great relationship we developed over the years. I knew his politics were progressive, and he lives in a very liberal university town. But what if he rejected me? What if he was fine with the idea of transgender people in general, but not a transgender parent? So I got more serious about telling him while I was attending a transgender support group. The group encouraged me to act. They offered lots of ideas and suggestions. And after a couple of meetings, we hatched a convoluted plan that could only have been created by a group. So the plan was this. Number one, we decided I should write a long and detailed history of my gender journey that would answer most of his questions, but I shouldn't send it just yet. Number two, when the time was right, I would send him an email and tell him I wanted to talk about something important. And I'd make clear that I didn't have some awful disease or something, it was just something else. Number three, I would then call him and tell him I'm transgender and provide few details other than to tell him to check his email once again. Then number four, I'd email him that long explanation. And then finally, number five, I'd wait for his call and answer his questions. So I got it all ready, but of course, I continued to put it off. I was just too frightened of what might happen if he said anything insulting or just hung up on me. Finally, I gathered up my courage and I sent the first email saying I wanted to talk. He wrote back immediately and said he was around and available. So the moment of truth had arrived and I made the call. Peter, I said, I need to tell you something really important about me. And after I tell you, I'm going to hang up and send you an email and all the details. Then we can talk afterwards. Okay, he said nervously. Then I blurted it out. I'm transgender. There was what felt like an hour of silence on the phone as he processed this totally unexpected information. Actually, it was probably only 30 seconds, maybe a minute, but it felt like forever. All I could do was sit in terror, wondering how he would take the news. Finally, he said one word I had never imagined in all my predictions, nightmares, fantasies about this conversation. He said, cool. I was confused, of course, but feeling optimistic. So I said I'd email him the information and then I'd call him back later. When we spoke again, he asked a lot of questions and seemed very interested in my transition. And then he came out to me. He said he'd been wanting to tell me for years that he was bisexual, had an open marriage, and a steady boyfriend. He said all my talk about knowing and working with LGBTQ plus people almost convinced him to come out to me earlier, but he chickened out too. That day, our relationship deepened in ways neither of us could have ever imagined. Our most important secrets were out, and we now talk regularly about our journeys. By the way, I'm sharing this information with his permission. He is now very much out about his sexual orientation and later decided he was gay rather than bisexual. So stories like this have been the most surprising part of my coming out process. Once I allowed myself to be vulnerable and honest about my gender identity, I heard all sorts of private and sensitive information from friends and family. One talked about the sexual abuse he suffered as a child. Another talked about her persistent thoughts of transitioning to become a male. I heard about drug problems, family conflicts, and mental health issues, all unrelated to my transition. I learned that when I dropped my guard and made myself vulnerable, many of them did too. And the results frequently were amazing. Now, it wasn't all sweetness and celebration, of course. One old friend was convinced I was playing a very bad joke on her. Another old friend nervously told me, it would be fine with me if we never talk about this again. No one was openly hostile, but a couple of friendships cooled considerably after I shared the news. So I'm a fan of Brené Brown, the author and researcher who studies courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy. In our second reading, she wrote, owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love and belonging and joy, the experiences that make us the most vulnerable. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. Her TED Talk, one you should try next week, I think, is entitled The Power of Vulnerability, dives into this topic. It has been viewed more than 66 million times and translated into 52 languages. So during my coming out period, I listened to that TED Talk at least a dozen times. Whenever I started to panic and question whether it really was necessary to share this very personal information, I'd listen again and trust her when she states that vulnerability is the only route to love and belonging and joy. She was right. So I'm talking about coming out today because next Friday, October 11th, is National Coming Out Day, a day celebrated each year since 1988 to support lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people in coming out of the closet and talking about their sexual orientation or gender identity. I want to make one thing clear: no one is required to come out. National Coming Out Day was established to support people who want to and can safely come out. Timing of that decision and the number of people you come out to are up to you. For me, this process took decades. And each October 2nd, 11th, I'd ask myself, is this the year? Took a long time. As I've watched the coming out process transform my life and the lives of so many of my friends, I've wondered why a similar day isn't available for the rest of you. You may not be gay or trans, but I believe most of us are hiding something in our closets. Things we're nervous about sharing with the rest of the world. Things that prevent us from being our authentic selves. Coming out doesn't mean we're required to make those uncomfortable parts of ourselves the central focus of our lives, but they are part of us. When we keep those parts hidden, it can feel like we're living in an Instagram world where all our photos are neatly cropped and filtered to make us look perfect, and our posts only talk about the amazing vacation we just took or the fabulous dinner we ate last night. This carefully curated version of our lives isn't true and doesn't encourage others to share their own authentic, less than perfect selves. Quite the opposite. Our filters encourage others to apply their own filters, and pretty soon, it's impossible to know who any of us really are. The challenge of coming out is achieving a balance between two good and essential things. First is privacy, the recognition that each of us has a right to a private life and can choose what we want to share. The other side of the coin is the knowledge that telling our truth can help us make connections with others and even change the world. There are lots of reasons to haul this stuff out of our closets. Two of the most frequently cited are psychological health and politics. I already mentioned the biggest psychological benefit for me, the chance to be authentic. When people liked the old me, I knew they liked the false image I was portraying. I always wondered, would they still like me if they knew who I really was? Thankfully, in most cases, the answer was yes. Another big reason for coming out is political. It was politics that led Harvey Milk to make some of the loudest and most famous calls for the LGBTQ community to come out. When elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1977, Milk was the first openly gay man to be elected to public office in California. On June 25th, 1978, He spoke at the Gay Freedom Day parade in San Francisco before a crowd estimated at between 250,000 and 375,000 people. He warned about the lies and myths being told by leaders of an anti-gay movement that then spreading across the nation. He asked the crowd, "Gay brothers and sisters, what are you going to do about it? You must come out. Come out to your parents. I know it's hard and will hurt them, but think about how they will hurt you in the voting booth. Come out to your relatives. I know that is hard and will upset them, but think how they will upset you in the voting booth. Come out to your friends, if indeed they are your friends. Come out to your neighbors, to your fellow workers, to the people who work where you eat and shop. Come out only to the people you know and who know you, not to anyone else. But once and for all, break down the myths, destroy the lies and distortions for your sake, for their sake." So things are much better for gay and lesbian people today, but transgender people are facing a wave of discrimination in the form of literally hundreds of hateful laws based on fears and unfounded stereotypes. Unfortunately, many of those laws are aimed at preventing young transgender and non-binary people from expressing their true gender identity. One of the many reasons I came out was to let my friends and family know a transgender person and understand that anti-trans laws like these are harming someone they love and care about. So members of the queer community aren't the only ones being called to come out for political reasons. The Me Too movement is an excellent example of how women and some men are standing up against sexual violence and discrimination. It's estimated that 1 in 6 American women have been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. But most of them aren't talking about it for obvious reasons. It's private. It can be a horribly painful memory. It can feel shameful and dirty. But silence in the face of violence has allowed sexual predators to keep committing crimes for years without facing consequences. That started to change in 2006 when a group of sexual assault survivors decided to come out about the violence they experienced and face their attackers together. It's grown into a worldwide movement of people sharing their stories and refusing to suffer in silence. Abortion is another example. It is estimated that 1 in 4 women in America has had an abortion, but most never talk about it. That silence made it easier for anti-abortion activists and the US Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. Women who are able to discuss it are being asked to come out about their experience and demonstrate that abortion isn't dangerous and psychologically damaging as those in the anti-abortion movement claim. It's much harder to oppose abortion when you realize your grandmother, wife, mother, aunt, niece, or daughter has wrestled with this decision and decided abortion was right for her. Physical illness is another thing we often hide in our closets. A friend of mine said she waited months before telling anyone outside her immediate family that she had a life-threatening cancer. She feared that once she announced it, everyone would treat her differently. And we probably did, at least for a while. It was her choice when and how to share this information, but keeping it secret meant she wasn't receiving the support she was craving from her friends. But she came out when she was ready. Mental illness, such as depression, is another of the things we often hide in our closets. Criminal records, of course. Eating disorders, alcoholism, drug abuse. We don't talk about these things either. Even more routine shame can crowd our closets. A lie you once told a friend and have regretted ever since. A test where you might just have cheated a little bit. Infidelity in an otherwise committed relationship. Taking something that wasn't yours. Even seemingly positive things can end up hidden in that closet. A friend I know won a prestigious MacArthur Fellowship, the so-called MacArthur Genius Award, for her scientific research. But she's reluctant to tell anyone about it because she doesn't think she really deserved it. Also, she doesn't want people expecting her to sound brilliant all the time and be disappointed when they realize she's just an ordinary person. And vulnerability is often essential to healthy relationships. After dating a few months and feeling optimistic about a relationship, someone needs to be the first to say, "I love you." It's frightening because the other person just might not feel the same. So maybe this October 11th, we all can think a little about what we're hiding in our closets that keeps us from being honest and authentic. We don't need to fling open the closet door and display to the world all the things we have hidden. But perhaps this year, or next, or the next, or the next, we can find the courage to share one of our secrets with a trusted friend and begin the process of cleaning out our crowded closets. As Andrew W.K. said in the first reading, each of us has a melody that is meant to be heard loud and clear. Our purpose in life is to transcend all the aspects of ourselves and our surroundings that seek to block out or interfere with the pure and uninhibited singing of this music inside us. May we all discover that pure and an uninhibited singing within us. Thank you so much.